What's good everyone, my name's Zayas, and today I'm here to review Blue Lock by Muneyuki Kaneshiro and Yusuke Nomura. This is only Nomura's second work after having drawn Dolly Kill Kill, which is a mediocre series overall, but the artwork did have its moments, and on top of that he was also an assistant for Attack on Titan, which is a pretty big name. Kaneshiro, on the other hand, has been a dominant force in psychological manga for over a decade now. He's collaborated with all sorts of artists, and his works have had their ups and downs. His debut as The God's Will definitely had some flaws, but overall I found it to be an actually enjoyable read and somewhat memorable, which is pretty surprising if you consider the state of survival manga in the 2010s. Then there was Dragon Collection, another series which has its flaws for sure, but it has some enjoyable moments. And then you get to stuff like Billion Dogs and Invisible Joe, which were just so bad. It's actually kind of staggering to see the difference between As the God's Will and Invisible Joe. And then directly afterwards, he makes Bokutachi ga Yarimashita, which is a great psychological series and my favorite work by him. And then there's a series like Jugon, which I really enjoyed, but partway through the series he just probably gave up or something. I don't know what happened, but the series became really bad after a certain point. Grass Rush seemed like it would be interesting, but in reality there was really nothing interesting about the series. And now he's already scheduled to make another series with the author of Prison School, which I have to check out just because it's the author of Prison School. Coming into this series and knowing both of these authors, I was expecting much more of a psychological slanted sports series, maybe something like One Outs. Instead, we get a very shonen sports series. And although I don't consider that alone to be a problem, Blue Lock has tons of problems. My least favorite part about this series is how over the top everything is, and everything is taken way too far. I'd say the main place where this shows up is the dialogue. This dialogue was horrible and kind of cringy to sit through, and this is because everything's so over the top, so dramatic, so emphasized, that it's hard to take it seriously. These characters are thinking entire paragraphs of the most meaningless garbage and the most simple stuff as they run back and forth down the field. Usually just one point that they talk about for about like 5 pages. Not only that, but they'll also beat several ideas into the ground. If you bring stuff up once, it's okay, but when you keep repeating it over and over again, it gets quite upsetting, especially when it's words like devour, how they talk about devouring the opponent, which doesn't even make sense, but maybe it's a mistranslation? I don't know. But then there's also stuff like the monster, where you bring up the monster once, okay, cool, he's schizophrenic, whatever. But they keep bringing it up every time they pan to this character. And then there's stuff like impregnating the world, which I guess is kind of funny, but really, that's not like the main motivation your character should have. I'd say the number one issue is that if you drop out of Blue Lock, you're done. In the first few selections, you can't be the best striker in the world anymore. And we know that the story is about Asagi, he's a protagonist, so he literally cannot lose. These guys act like the striker is the most important position in soccer, and you have to be the best striker in the world to win a championship or whatever, but in reality, it really isn't. You need great players everywhere, and it doesn't have to be the striker that wins you the championship. But these guys like to act like that because the entire idea of Blue Lock is being flashy, being over the top, having these cool moments, and it's all about scoring goals. Blue Lock seems much more like a battle shonen than an actual sports series, and that's because a lot of the important elements in sports are kind of just taken and yanked out. Now, there's stuff like teamwork and camaraderie that's kind of built over the season that is just gone because these teams are just randomly assigned. And then there's stuff like defense, which isn't even touched upon because these guys don't want to be goalkeepers. They want to be strikers because that's exciting, right? And then there's stuff like training, which isn't even really touched upon. Like you see these guys train every once in a while, but these guys aren't practicing shots. These guys aren't training hard, running, whatever. All of that is just skipped out on. That's also another point. These characters don't actually get better at soccer over time. They're just randomly gifted abilities. It's like these guys have preset talents that can't be changed and they just randomly learn abilities from time to time once they're about to like mentally crack or something. It doesn't really even make sense. And after they learn this ability, apparently they can just repeat it over and over again. Like the most ridiculous example of this is that one guy who just randomly decided he was going to copy everybody's moves. Like, what gives you the ability to do that? When it comes to characters, the characters in this series are just horrible. Isagi in particular, he's one of the most bland looking and boring protagonists with no real skills or abilities to talk of. I'm sure they made him overly analytical and not that athletically gifted so that the average Joe can relate to him. Really, Isagi is just a boring character who only really got through because he's the protagonist. If Isagi was a side character, he probably would have been eliminated in like the first 2 selections. The other characters have some potential, but at the end of the day, all of their personalities can just be rounded up to, I want to be the best striker in the world, and that's it. The one arc which I think was a little less bad than the others was the U20 arc, although I really didn't like it overall, but it was a little bit better because instead of focusing on the dialogue, characters randomly learning techniques and stuff, they focused a little more on the characters and character design and involved a bunch of cool looking characters. And character design is actually a strength of this series. There's actually a pretty interesting and colorful looking cast, all of which are pretty instantly recognizable. Although I still didn't like Isagi's character design. But aside from that, the artwork is actually not that great. When you see a lot of this artwork, there's a lot of empty backgrounds, which kind of leaves it feeling pretty lifeless. Sometimes it's hard to even recognize the stadium you're in because the author doesn't show that much of the stadium. A lot of the artwork too is just characters running back and forth down the field. And I understand that's a lot of what soccer is, but a lot of the best sports manga have managed to make this look interesting. Stuff like haikyuu 21, Giant Killing, Baby Steps, or even Ping Pong. And lastly, there was these over-the-top shots where characters had this aura surrounding them. They may have grown wings. Maybe there's a skull in the background or something. And although if you look at it from an artistic sense and look at it alone, it doesn't look bad. But I don't think it really enhanced the experience or made me think, wow, I'm enjoying this soccer game even more. Because these guys are just playing soccer. Like, you don't need to grow a pair of wings to win a soccer game. It's just so ridiculous and way too much to the point where you don't really even get to enjoy it. All the hype, all the excitement, all the high tension moments just didn't do it for me. I feel like these characters are all pretty boring. They all have the same goal. And the story is just kind of falling apart everywhere. I'm feeling like a decent to strong 2. Thank you everyone for watching, like and subscribe. And I'm going to be putting out my next videos a lot faster because hopefully I'll be able to get through these bad series faster too, because this was tough, but I think I can do better. Okay, see you.